Testing that the transcript pickup is working. 1, 2, 3.
Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing today? That good? Everyone can hear me, right? I'm being heard.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. So actually the very first question as part of housekeeping today is to take everyone's temperature and to find out how everyone is doing and feeling about the fellowship, or this is the next to the last meeting. I know there's still a lot of work to be done, and just a kind of a reminder to everyone that it's a pilot, and thank you so much for joining our pilot. But I want to hear from you folks. How's it going? Anyone willing to speak up or type in to chat?
Erin, it's not so much the content or anything like that. It's actually balancing things and making the time, or having the time to work through the modules. There's nothing excessive here, and it all makes sense, at least from my perspective. My biggest problem is the time that you guys have no control over. I have some control over, but that's really the bigger issue. So
it's the fact that we're working with, working adults that have lots of demands from various places.
Yeah, typical online, typical online type things. It's, at least from my perspective, and again, it's just because my team is in a period of transition from a more facilitated one-on-one process for working with faculty one-on-one for due course development, and transitioning to more of a professional development environment. So that plays a factor in my time. So yeah, I'm not the only one that is having.
Oh, you're not.
Time challenges.
Yeah, you were certainly not.
That I think that from my perspective has been my biggest challenge thus far.
Okay, well, thank you for all of that. That's good to know. We're trying to brainstorm ways, and I'd love to get more feedback from all of you and what would have maybe helped in terms of that, balancing that time, just so that we can make this better going forward. And thanks for the comments, and very fast paced.
Yeah, I put that very fast paced. I think maybe having a week between certain things, certain modules, because to me, as opposed to Teresa, it's a lot of new content and new way to look at things. So there is a steep learning curve, and having that time to reflect and then actually work on it and things. I mean, I'm way behind, and but just having some of that work time, and then I haven't been pardon me, been able to come on any Fridays because I have a meeting from 3 to 4 every single Friday, so that doesn't work. But I don't know if there's a way, because there's a lot of content each week, so I don't know if you could do like the content and then like an optional meeting, and maybe spread it out to 8 instead of 6 weeks, but have a couple in there that could be working at the same time that we come live.
Yeah. The other thing is probably to offer another set of office hours, because if you can't make that office hours, then you'll never be able to make those office hours. You know what I mean? You'll probably have some recurring meeting or something going on at that time. Know that we're happy to do one-on-one meetings as well. So if you want to message me an email, and like we can set up some one-on-one time even, because then I also might be able to help you navigate what exactly is necessary versus optional and we are flexible. That's for sure. This isn't like, you know, a college credit course where, you know, you're going to be graded on everything. And we're still trying to figure out and right size the workload for this. I think that idea of going to 8 weeks is probably a good one. And to the rest of my team, you know, UA and I met this morning and talked through some really great ideas for some things we can do to add more scaffolding and to maybe even pair people up, have some group work, that sort of thing to help. And thank you also for the comment in here about, you know, content and having trouble. Not everybody can come with content ready to go. And so that was another thing we were discussing, like maybe offering some redesign stuff that we have in our backlog, as well as like potential sources of content for folks. So thank you
Yeah.
for that comment.
Yeah, in chat, Sign said getting a good handle on learning objectives and assessments, but how to make the content, or maybe having sample content to work with to do this design. As a non-teaching / non-practicing instructional designer, I'm a librarian. This is a bit hard to deal with in the abstract. And Colleen Kaminsky said it's very fast-paced.
Yeah.
Jackie Kelleher said, I'm behind because I took a few vacation days and I just haven't had time to catch up. My goal for the week is to be on task point by office hours on Friday. So far, the work itself hasn't been overwhelming. As Teresa just said, it's finding the time. A week between some of the modules is a great idea. And Angela Thering said, I agree with 8 weeks and include the pre-homework in the 8 weeks, please. I was very behind the first week as the dates of this fellowship were not exactly accurate.
Yeah, we had thought that like having pre-work leading up to the 6 weeks, but we should have just made it 7 weeks. You know, I get what you're saying. Yeah, being very crisp and clear about the amount of work. The other thing we want to be able to do going forward is at least let folks know, you know, what to expect in terms of time for each week. And so I really will be looking for you guys to kind of give me some of that information. Like, if you could let me know somewhere between now and any time in the next, you know, month or so, like how much time did it take you to do all of this work roughly, just so that we can be better next time with making sure that we're building in enough time to do the work or paring down some of the work. It sounds like it wasn't the amount of work, it's the amount of time we gave for the work might be the issue.
But I think some of it may go back to what Colleen said. You know, some of us are experienced instructional designers. So for us, some of this is, you know, well, I got to build, you know, we've been doing this for a few years or 20 years, depending.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of the para, because I think of myself as a practitioner and keeping, you know, reminding myself, hey, this isn't everybody's vocabulary, you know, so it's really, I just like that idea of being able to work with somebody who may not have as much experience as I do, but then again, they help me in reminding myself why I'm a practitioner and why I love what I do.
And in chat, Angela had said, nobody minds pre-work. I just didn't know to look for it. And Sign says, maybe also rather than office hours, have it be 2 sessions a week or something, because not knowing how important the office hours are. I have prior plans on Friday and I'm not able to take advantage. If I had known, I might have been able to rearrange my schedule.
Okay, that's great. Great feedback, everyone. Amazing feedback. I really appreciate it. And no, you know, just the fact that you guys, again, we're very flexible and this is a pilot. So we want you all to feel like you're going to finish, right? And we'll work out what completion means still with each of you. Yeah, you guys made it clear that we would make other arrangements and we would meet one-on-one. We're really here for you guys and to scaffold you all. The other thing I wanted to mention, because you mentioned groups or we mentioned like pairing people up, just so you know, we modeled this off of our LearnLab summer school experience. For those of you who might not know that experience, it's a week in person, and it's done more with groups of like, you know, 3 to 4 folks working on, you know, doing exactly what you're doing, with all similar lectures as well, but it's all packed into 1 week. So we thought spreading it out over 6 weeks was going to be good enough, but maybe not. And so, and because this is more of like a, it gets a certificate of completion. The Learn Lab Summer School, you get a certificate of completion as well for the end of the week, but it's very different. There's no completion criteria. You just, if you're there for the week and you attend everything, you get the completion certificate. So we were trying to figure out a way to make it spread out more, but still make it clear, like, also being a free program, we had to make sure that there were some sort of completion guidelines, or else everybody would just, we'd afraid people would just show up and then drop off and then want the certificate. So we had to be a little more clear about that.
In chat, Jill
yeah.
said, I like that despite the fact that I've been doing this for 20 years, this learning pushed me in new directions. And
Yay.
Angela Thering said, you guys did make it clear that you would make other arrangements for office hours. I just didn't ask yet. And Jill
Mhm.
Haskell said, I had to put what I know aside and be open to new learning. And Sign said, the other arrangements are okay, but I do learn better from hearing others' questions. And Angela Thering said, we appreciate that. I wish I took more advantage of it. Can you send us the info on the summer school?
Oh, of course, we can totally send you out the summer school information. And we encourage everyone, it's a really fun experience. Even if you've attended this, you'll get something out of summer school because you're also exposed to the other tracks that happen at that time. There's like an educational data mining track. There's a track on creating cognitive tutors and some other ones. Thanks, Caitlin, for putting that in the chat. It's a pretty cool experience, just even to be in person with everyone, and really, it's intense, but it's fun. And that's what we were hoping this would be as well. I think we got both the intense and the fun, but we got the timing wrong. But I appreciate you all being great sports and continuing to do the work. And I'm very happy to hear that one of my big fears was that we were going to be reteaching things you already know. So I'm glad to hear that there's been some aha moments and some new stuff that you've been able to learn here, because that just really makes me feel good about the whole thing.
Well, and review's a good thing too. I mean, some
Yeah.
of this stuff I haven't looked at in 15 years.
Okay.
I've just been doing it, and so no,
Yeah.
review is a good thing. So I think that's helpful too, because then it's like, oh yeah, I learned that in grad school.
And you're like, and I was hoping that at the same time you'd find, like I said at the beginning of this, like, you guys do probably do a lot of this. You just don't have maybe the vocabulary that we have for it, or maybe we put emphasis on certain practices that maybe you've just got grown out of doing, because when you work for a particular organization, they have their own kind of process, and they might kind of force you to skip over some things that we feel are very valuable to getting the right learning design.
The other thing I want to add is that the module you had on reading research, that was really helpful because, I've been reading research for years, right? But I have one of my staff who does not have the traditional instructional designer training. She's more of a, she went through vocational education. So she has a real good handle on the learning, adult learning and stuff like that. But what she doesn't have is the literature from, and from the instructional design perspective. So me thinking about that can only help me help her, as I want her to read some of the seminal ID research, because I think it will help her as she moves forward in the field. So I think that was really, really helpful, because I never thought about all of that. I just read it.
Yeah, this is helping making you a better mentor even. So that's helpful. That's great. And the reason I wanted to have that piece, because I didn't learn until I took some grad school courses that it's actually expected to just read strategically when you're thrown tons of research papers to read. I didn't learn that until like 2 years ago. Well, maybe it was more like 5, but I was so excited to learn that. I'm like, I wish someone would have told me this earlier. Sasha, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so in chat, Angela had said about Learn Lab and funding information, of course, and said, I came late, but I wanted to share that the workshop time was great. And Jill Haskell said, the benefit of an intensive 1 week is that you're in it. With this program, you had to slam gears from class to reality and back. And
Yeah.
Angela Thering said, agreed. I can see how if I were immersed, I could churn this out.
Yeah. I will say Learn Love Summer School is something though that's not free. And you know, having to travel to Pittsburgh, we wanted to offer something that didn't require all of that expense and travel. But you guys are definitely going to help us make it way better. So thank you.
Can I ask just a quick question about the summer school?
Sure.
I'm looking at it right now and I see that it's held in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon.
It is.
It says the application will open early in 2024. Do they have any type of housing or hotel arrangements that they usually set up with that? Or are we responsible for getting a place to stay on our own for the week?
You're usually responsible for your own travel and housing and transportation. However, I believe that most years they do set aside some dorm housing that's a little cheaper, more inexpensive, that I can actually, or we can help you get if you're looking for something like that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
To add to that, Erin, I think we also have some funding from NSF for this. So if instructors or folks here are interested to join, we can probably get it for free.
Oh, excellent.
And the wonderful thing about LearnLab is you can go 5 times and get 5 different things, like 5 completely different tracks. I think the longest anyone has ever gone is 3 years in a row.
Mhm. Yeah, but it's super interesting. And even when you're here for one track, you get exposed to all the work being done. So it's similar. All the tracks are similar in that they all do an intensive project and present it at the end of the week. And so you get exposed to like so many cool ideas and things that you never even thought of you could do with this kind of data as well, which is super, super interesting. Okay, so thank you guys all for being so open and providing that feedback, and we're definitely taking it to heart, and it will iterate accordingly. So you're going to make it better for your colleagues and others. So thank you so much. So this week's going to be where like the rubber hits the road, where you're going to be really building out your module. If you haven't started already, it's definitely time to start putting things into Taurus. And so we're going to go over a little bit of page design stuff today, as well as accessibility. Oh, here's the thing. So we're going to talk about how to make online learning more active. We're going to do some page design, some accessibility deep dive, and then how some more like how to use Taurus and what happens between the tools and how we're going to get that data and all of that. And then with whatever time we have left, we'll just have a working session with us here to help answer questions or help with things, whatever. And I would encourage you to stay and work in Taurus during that time, just so that if you haven't already, you get a feel for it with some support here. And if you already are on your way, there might be some cool stuff you want to try and do that we can help answer and give direction on how to do it. So let's dive in. So I already went through how's everyone doing. Thank you again. Now, just really quickly, what kind of ideas do you have for making online learning more active? How do you think you do that? Or how have you done it in the past? What are some ideas?
One of the biggest challenges that I know that I've run into is some of the organizations that I've worked with in the past read some of the research that said that people were supposed to interact with their learning. Like I can't remember what the statistic was, but it was like every 2 to 3 minutes there was supposed to be an interaction, and they interpreted interaction as the learner physically doing an activity. So there was all of this where it was, okay, had to have your cameras on and you have to raise your hand, or show a number 1 if you agree or a number 2 if you disagree. And it was like, is that really interacting with the learning? So we also talked about making the actual presentation itself more interactive by having more engagement, the information coming in different ways, using more picture versus word based, and really kind of using more of those adult learning, like putting up a thought and then doing exactly what you just did. Putting it up and going, okay, now what do you think about this? Or take a minute to jot your ideas down, and then here's a whiteboard, let's share. And really kind of turning over some of the teaching aspects to the people who are involved in the class, rather than just raise your hand, take a poll.
Mhm.
Because literally every 3 minutes doing a poll is exhausting.
Yeah, those are all great ideas, and that's more of like a blended learning format. So I'm also interested in how we make things interactive from a a synchronous or a completely asynchronous online course as well. I'm interested in all those ideas. Angela, you have
One
something?
moment. In chat, Sign says hands-on activities to learn rather than just reading about it or watching about it. And Angela Thering says our program works with RSI as a key goal for course design, and linked to a website on RSI.
Yeah, Oscar, I'm familiar with that. We actually did an evaluation of one of our courses against the Oscar rubric at one point in time. It's a decent alternative to what's the other one?
Quality Matters.
Yes, Quality Matters. Thank you.
It's like an iteration on Quality Matters. But what I'm most interested in, let's say our department is most obsessed with in RSI, is that these are federal guidelines for financial aid. And also, like, I'm a professor, I'm not on the instructional design team. I teach instructional design, right? So like I see this from a professor's view of teaching instructional design. But one of the things that I have wrestled in with the RSI is that for my master's courses, which are more learning by doing, like the project I'm working on with you guys about UDL and basic principles of UDL and course design, that is a learning by doing exercise that I'm working on for this project. But for my undergrad courses that have more kind of traditional PowerPoint, watch the video, take the quick kind of stuff like that, the RSI was pretty weak. And the way we approached that was weekly content focused check-ins on performance and main goals for performance, which really worked pretty successfully. And I've only done it once. I'm teaching that class again in the spring. But I think that the RSI guidelines, despite the fact they're in SUNY, even people who aren't in SUNY, you can access them elsewhere. These are federal guidelines. And I'm very interested to see where the teeth from this policy might play out. Because specifically what they're saying with RSI, the feds, is if your class is a correspondence course, which I am deeply guilty of teaching some online courses that from this outline would be considered a correspondence course, they are not qualified for financial aid, which has deep impacts on course design and how people move forward with it. Having that said, and Teresa's kind of nodding her head, I don't know about any teeth with this. I just know it's coming and it's something the feds care about, but I don't know about anyone who's paying attention to this. There's forms to fill out, there's things to do. I focus on it for quality, but it's something that I focus on because, SUNY's got to pay the bills too, right? I don't want to be the class that, the feds decide can't be funded. So I think that it adds a layer of seriousness to this concept that, listen, we need to have, more instructor interaction, and making your class more active. Instructor interaction I see those things as deeply related. But I threw the link on there in case anyone wants to play with it, and I'll be quiet.
And can you explain RSI? Can you explain what RSI is?
RSI is regular and substantive.
That's right.
Interactions. Right. And again, SUNY's caring about this in a specific way that I don't see other communities caring about this. But this is not a New York State thing. This is a federal thing.
Yeah, it's federal. So when I worked for Western Governors University, this was a huge thing because they're completely online and they don't have faculty. They have what are called coaches. And to have to explain that there is RSI, even with this, in fact, if we did an analysis and the coaches the students ended up having more one-on-one time with instructors than in a regular model. So I'm actually surprised that SUNY's like so concerned about it, because, you know, when you have a boots on the ground university, you really don't.
Well, this is for online class. I only teach online.
Oh, for online, I
So,
see.
Yeah.
but having that said, when I went through the SUNY rubric about 10 years ago for a course review, RSI was not on there. And it is, it's a recent addition that
Yeah,
is obviously something that's RSI counts as like showing up and looking at them in a traditional classroom. I mean, that's it.
right.
Look, you're there, ta-da, you looked, they looked at you, that's it. But we need to make these things much more intentional
Mhm.
in an online environment, and that makes it, you know, there's just another layer there.
Yeah, I'm welcome to talk to anybody with, if anybody's interested in how other universities have done it, that are.
I'm
fully-
always interested, yeah.
I would talk about that.
Wrong one.
And in chat, Colleen Kaminsky said, I have used Google Jamboard where anyone can engage on the whiteboard asynchronously. And Jill Haskell said, I have had good success with having learners create web quests for their peers to share their own journey of learning.
Those are great ideas. Teresa, you have something more to add?
Yeah, just very quickly with RSI and Oscar. Number one, my associate dean and I, assistant dean and I were part of the team that originally worked on creating the Oscar rubric. So, and then it's exploded, and then SUNY has taken it on. What is in that rubric for RSI is strictly based on the federal guidelines, number one. Number two, we've taken a lot of components and understanding from WCET that helps break those regulations down. I hear you, what you're saying about the teeth, and a lot of that has to do with each individual institution.
Mhm.
You know, my associate provost is the one who emailed me when this happened and said, okay, because I sit on a faculty committee, which I actually chair, which has to do with instructional or information technology and instructional technology and how all of that works together, including these federal guidelines. I actually wrote the policy for my institution, but it's based on Vanderbilt's.
Mm,
So there's a lot of stuff out there about RSI, and we could talk about this for hours and hours and
Right.
hours. But you're right that when Oscar was first created, there was nothing about RSI. They went back and they looked at the different components of that, and then made sure they did a whole section on the Oscar webpage pertaining to which pieces directly correspond with RSI.
this is
So-
interesting. Yeah,
so
because
this
I
is-
didn't realize they were making such a big move to talking about RSI. So
SUNY does, yes.
Yeah, interesting.
We've been doing the, oh God, RSI gives me a headache. 18 months at least.
Oh,
So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, you figure that rubric was started back in, I want to say 2015,
yeah.
and then went live, and then again, the collaboration with SUNY and OLC. So yeah, there's yeah. So anyway, I'll shut up now on this because
We'll
like I
have to
said,
have a
we could
whole
go
like
on.
RSI support group talk.
Exactly. And I did, if I'm not mistaken, there's one or two other, there's probably at least a half a dozen other people from SUNY on here too. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's mostly SUNY, so that's why it's fine to kind of talk about that specifically. So learn
In
by
chat,
doing.
Angela Thering said, thank you for this history, Teresa. And Teresa suggests emailing you. So
Yeah, let's be email buddies, she says. So learn by doing is really just engaging students in some interaction as they work through the materials, right? And this can be done in a number of ways, as we all know, and depending on the modality and the type of way you can deliver materials or get, students working together and things like that, it's different. But no, like for online learning and the way we think about it is that really it's just making the students do something other than sitting there passively reading or watching. And we've actually found, and I'm going to I'm going to, I have a bunch of resources in my notes here for this. But I don't think we made you guys read the doer effect, but if you read this, and the study's been replicated even, and I put the principle here, I'm gonna put this in chat. It's really just the idea, and there's been research done, and it's, like I said, it's been replicated. That, you know, the doer effect is really just a principle that students who engage in more practice in any way, shape, or form have higher learning gains than those who just watch videos or read text. And it's actually had causal, through statistical modeling, it has a causal relationship, meaning that those students who did something, interacted in some way, engaged in practice, do way better. So what this means, and we kind of know this at its core, but I was just talking to someone yesterday about this and had to remind them that, like, really the only way anyone learns is by doing and getting feedback, doing and getting feedback, doing and getting feedback. Because if you, I mean, you can do and do and do, and you can do it wrong all the time, right? You're not really learning. But if you do it and you get some sort of feedback and you do some more practice and you get that feedback, that's where learning is really occurring. And that's pretty much what this study is finding. And so what we try to do is incorporate as much of these practice opportunities. And that's why we focus on assessment in a way, is because in a fully online program, we have very little tools at hand to incorporate that doing, that practice. And so we focus on just giving students practice early and often and as much as possible. So we have a few examples here of some course pages, and I'm just going to go through them really quickly because I think I need to even catch up on some time here because we have a lot to go through. But instead of discussing this, just really want to point out some things. So this is a page that has lots of text, what I would call a wall of text, interspersed with a few activities. This is a drop-down activity. This is one is a open response. This, I will say, is not terrible. I would, if I were going to redesign this page, I would probably add some images, maybe some videos, the idea to break up the text. But what it's doing right is interspersing that practice. It's not waiting to the student gets at the very end of the page and then gives them a fire hose of questions. It's really trying to engage the student early and often. This one does what I just said. It's a page with a text and then a video and then a bunch of practice. Now, what this page is doing, though, and what we really try to encourage folks to do, that if you do put videos, if you do put labs or embed different types of things into the course, that you follow it up with a set of questions, practice questions, to really not only help the student know what they were supposed to get out of that video or what they were supposed to get out of that experience, but also to know, for us to know as designers or even as instructors, if what we intended the student to get out of it, they in fact did get out of it before moving on. Here is a page that is like almost all activity. So if you see this, this is a PhET simulation lab. So I think this isn't a chemistry course. So this is a whole lab activity that the students work through that's embedded in the page. And then it's followed up with Taurus or OLI native kind of activities as well. Again, with the idea of, you know, the student could do this PhET simulation a million times. It might just play around and not really get to correctness or right answers. So follow that up with some more additional practice to really, and checks for understanding to make sure that they are getting out of it. And so we have some colleagues that we work with in a Swedish university that have this hypothesis that you can learn everything you need to learn in a course through the activities and the questions that you embed and the practice that you embed, through the targeted feedback and the hints that you can use. They're trying this out with some different topics, and I'm going to be helping with that later in the month. But and what I've seen so far is pretty interesting. Like, you can learn by doing, by just practicing and answering questions that you might even not know the answers to until you start to look at all that feedback and hints. It's still a hypothesis that hasn't been fully tested out, but it's one that we like to try to do constantly, meaning we try to incorporate as much practice as possible. And in Taurus, we have these two main types of what we call activities, but they're questioned, they're groups of questions essentially. One is called Learn by Doing, and the other one is Did I Get This? And you'll see these, and the intent is that in a Learn by Doing question, it's really, they're the same question types. You can still do multiple choice or pull down or whatever. It's more of like a philosophical label. And the idea is that in a Learn by Doing, you embed those early and often in the page, along with the content. You're giving lots of scaffolding with hints and very targeted feedback. And even in some cases, you might design the activity or the practice or the questions to be almost in place of the text that the students should have read before it. So we all know students rarely read or they skim. What we found in most of the research that we do is students go right to those practice opportunities, and a lot of times skip the reading entirely. So if you can even build in Learn by Doing practice opportunities after, I look for opportunities to put in Learn by Doing after every paragraph. What can I take this paragraph and make it into more of a Learn by Doing opportunity instead of having the student read? What if I incorporate all that information and learning right into the activity itself? And so that's kind of what our philosophy and approach are. And then if you're going to do that, then at the end of some chunk of material, then add these checks for understanding, which we call Did I Get This? And those checks for understanding are really usually have no hints, or we design them to not have hints. So removing some of that scaffolding and giving the student an opportunity to literally check, did I get what I was supposed to get out of this page before moving on? And so we have this approach where we intersperse those types of activities throughout an entire page. I'm going to skip this one. So I already talked about the Did I Get This? Checks for understanding. But let me show you just a quick example. Well, first of all, wait, let me move on here to this one. So an ideal page layout that has been proven over and over again with our courses and with the research that's done with our courses is this general sequence of things. So you put the learning objective at the top of the page and you make sure it's written in a student-centered, measurable way so students understand what the goal of that learning will be. You follow that up with text. Make sure you're highlighting terminology and anything that you need to draw the student's eye to that will also help them restudy the material. So when you're building online learning content, you have to remember it's not just for the student to read it once, practice once, and go through. It's really there as a guide then too that students can go back to and recall and jog their memory and study for maybe a certification exam down the road or something else. And so I try to design each page for both of those purposes, to learn it and practice it, but then to also be able to go back. And the way you do that is by making good use of the headings and the and I have a little plug here later for like image captions, like those could be very useful for even studying. Basically terminology and text, then an activity as soon as possible. I try to go no more than 2 to 3 paragraphs without something, whether it be an image to break up the page, a video, some multiple representation of the content, or practice. And then end with checks for understanding, and then say, make sure you do lots of summaries and summaries to help the students, recall and remember and restudy as well. And so I'm going to give you a quick, I have that embedded in this. I have a little video, but I'm just going to show you what the video is. It's really just a view of this page, just going down this page. So again, exemplifying some of those things. What this page is missing, which I'm surprised because I know it has, which is the learning objective at the top. And then again, paragraph, something, anything to break up the page. Now, granted, we don't like to put in just aesthetic images for the heck of it. They should be helpful in some way. Again, very little text before you get right into the practice. And this is then the scaffolded practice. My course doesn't seem to be working today. I don't know why. It might be the way I'm in it. Then again, this activity is learned by doing. So if I could demonstrate it accurately, it would show all the targeted feedback that are that's written to each of these answer options. Then I have a video demonstrating something, and then a did I get this, which would not have any scaffolding. And then these are all did I get this checks for understanding, because there was a lot in that video. And then again, before I even not too much text before having something to break it up, and more checks for understanding, more video, more, so you're getting this sense that you want, in order for the student to even feel like the page is interactive, even if they are just reading, they're not just reading, they're practicing, they're watching, they're doing a number of different things with the content. And that's what we like to do. So sorry, I'm just moving windows around here so I can get back to my presentation. So I mentioned this before, but another important part of designing these pages and laying these pages out is to help with restudy. So I mentioned the headings and topic headings and things like that to make use of those. But I really, when I've led teams of learning designers in the past, I always make sure that they can justify an image on the page. And the way I see justifying an image on the page is by helping write, if you can write the caption that helps the student understand what this has to do with the learning objective, or how this aids in facilitating their mastery with the learning objective, then I think that is the best practice that you can provide, because then even if a student's restudying, they can easily just read those image captions and get back up to speed. So in this case, these are two examples. They're not easy to read, but I'll just go over them really quickly. This one is of maybe I can maybe I can blow this up a little bit even. One is of a slideshow and see if that helps. Sorry, guys. So one is an image of an introduction to psychology and different types of psychology. And it's not important that you can read this, but the learning objective is distinguish between the contributions of philosophy, the physical sciences, and the six early schools of psychology to the field of psychology. And the caption is just from Flat Word Knowledge, Introduction to Psychology, and the license for the image. So I really believe in this case, the designer didn't take advantage of the caption enough. They could have said, here are the six early schools of psychology, and really help make sure that image is useful to the content and in service of the LO. And in this case, the LO was identify ethical violations in research conducted with humans and animals. And the caption is, psychologists may use animals in their research, but reasonable efforts are made to minimize the animal's discomfort. Again, from Flat World Knowledge, Introduction to Psychology. So the reason I use these two examples is because you see how this one is almost like an unnecessary image. I mean, you don't need to see a mouse to understand that mice are used in research. But I think on this page, they made a much better use of the caption and the image by tying it together. In this case, the image is very relevant, but just at a glance, it's not very clear to the student why. And so here's two examples of how even aesthetic images can be used to help further understanding, even if you're using them to just break up a page. So that's my little rant on captions, because no, I don't know very many people that have a rant on captions. So I wanted to share it with you all. I'm going to turn over the next part of this presentation to my colleague Sasha, who is going to talk about accessibility. And I just realized that I stopped the share of it. Sasha, you probably want me to run the slides. Is that okay?
Yeah, great. I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to talk about accessibility. And first is a question for the group. So what have you done in the past to make your courses accessible?
I use accessibility checkers online to like run my PowerPoints or sites through just to make sure like color contrast is good. Just like that's like the first basic step I do when I'm making slides and things like that for online materials.
Great.
Yeah, and just so you know, Sasha, we have some comments. Teresa says, I have stories. Angela says the list is too long. Sign says the transcripts, font size, alternative text for images, audio accessibility, following UDL. Jill says color testing, alt text provide scripts. Angela, yes, the checkers and Brightspace are an excellent tool. And then Colleen wrote caption videos, and Allison wrote video transcripts, giving any docs in multiple formats. Wow, you guys are good. That's all the comments.
All right. Yeah, thank you everyone for the contributions. And looks like Jill Haskell said,
Yeah.
we'll report our methods on activities too.
Yes, good catch.
All right, slide. Improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people. This is a quote from Universal Design for Learning, and who have a really great website about Universal Design for Learning if you want to visit it later. And this presentation isn't really about universal design, but I think this illustrates something really important in the connection between accessibility and everything else we're doing, which is that right at the core, what we want to happen is we want students to successfully learn things from what we're teaching them. And so learning sciences are part of that, and accessibility is also part of that, because if students can't access materials and opportunities, they can't learn stuff. Slide. So we're just gonna talk about a few accessibility highlights today. Of course, accessibility is a really large field and there's a lot to do, but it's really great to get started. And I know we also have multiple universal design experts here with us and multiple accessibility experts. So if you notice things I'm getting wrong, I hope I'm not, but if you do, or want to add something, please do. Again, accessibility, very large field, hopefully growing field, and we always want to keep learning. So we're just going to talk about some accessibility highlights. Slide. So first going to talk about images and alt text. So in general, alt text should convey the relevant information about an image or the material to someone who can't see the image. In general, a thing you want to avoid is images of text, including tables, which is something people can commonly take pictures of, because text is a very accessible format. A screen reader can read it. You can turn it into Braille. You can make it larger. You can change the color. And this is much harder to do with images. In Taurus, actually, you're going to be working in Taurus. We have an audit tool that will help you find missing alt text in images. So here I have an image of what the audit tool looks like. You can tell it you want accessibility feedback, and it'll point you to images without alt text. And a thing I want to note here is this is actually a great example of how a lot of accessibility guidelines are kind of contextual, because I just told you to avoid images of text, and then I put an image of text on this slide. But the reason I did that is because in this case, it is actually important what this looks like, because that's what it's going to look like in the Taurus. But then I described it so that if someone couldn't see it, they would still know what I was talking about. So again, that's something that is important in accessibility. Slide. All right, so there are different kinds of images when we talk about alt text, and one kind is decorative images, which we're not really going to talk about because you generally shouldn't have images in courses that aren't doing anything except being pretty. So we're going to start with simple images. And in general, for simple images, you just want a short description that's focused on the purpose of the image in context. So what information is this image conveying? You generally want this to be accurate, of course, and you want it to be concise. Remember that a screen reader is going to read all the text out loud. So if it's very long, this is going to take up a lot of the student's time. A kind of particular note is don't use image or graphic because screen readers actually just add that. The image in context is an important element. So here I have a picture of a cover of a physics textbook, and it has a skier on it. And let's say that I had this in a physics course where I just wanted people to see what the textbook was. I would probably be able to just put in the basic information like the title and the author and the edition, and I don't need to, for example, describe the color of the skier's jacket because that's not relevant. But if this image was in a course about textbook cover design, then I would want to describe the image in much more detail. I'm going to save questions for the end if that's okay. Is that okay? All right. Slide. So another kind of image is complex images. So these are things like infographics or charts, for instance. This is kind of a specialty. Our digital accessibility office actually recently did a presentation on it. I don't know if SUNY has something like that, but they might. But basically what you want to do is provide the material in an alternate format and direct students to that alternate format. You don't want to try to put all the information in the alt text because you can't do formatting in alt text, so it'll be harder to read because you can't have headings or bullet points or anything. So you want to consider the surrounding context and avoid repetition, again, because students are going to have to listen to all of it. You want to start high level and drill down. So for instance, if you have a flow chart, you want to explain the overall purpose of the flow chart before you start getting into the individual nodes and lines. And you want to segment content. Again, if you have a large flow chart, you want to see if, for instance, it has pieces, so it's easier for people to understand. Speaking of surrounding context, in general, you don't need to repeat information. So if an image has a caption that already partially describes it, the alt text can be shorter and not repeat that information. All right, video captions and transcripts. These are important. As I think people know, captions are time-based. They're synchronized to the video and they just show up on the screen generally. And transcripts just have all the information all together and you can read through them. These are both important and they do different things. So generally you can get them together with a lot of technology. Sorry, I lost my place. A thing I also want to note, right, is in general, accessibility is really important, obviously, for disabled students. It's very important to include everybody. Also, as a general rule, being accessible is helpful to everybody. So for instance, image descriptions also help if someone's connection is really slow and they can't load the image. Video transcripts also help for previewing or reviewing content because you might not want to rewatch the whole video. Captions also help if someone's somewhere noisy, and so on. So for captions and transcripts, you can use some applications that include them, like YouTube. You can generate them yourself or using a service. If you're using auto-generated captions and alt text, it's good to check them over because sometimes it makes errors. And again, these are just generally helpful to a lot of people. Slide. All right, table headers. So if you look at this slide, I have two different images of tables, which again, I said not to do that, but in this case, what's important is how they look. Both of them are just a not like the information is not really important. It's just saying months and how many days they have. And they look pretty similar. They have a bold looking heading at the top, and then they have information. But actually underlyingly, they're not the same. And so this also shows the HTML code for both of them. And so one of them, the table headers are actually table headers, the element, and the other one, they're bold. And again, to a sighted person, they look the same, but they are not the same to a screen reader. And for a screen reader, you want the table header so that the screen reader can help someone understand the table. So remember to use these in Taurus. There's a way to make something a table header. Slide. Unique link text. So screen readers can navigate through links on a page. If you're using a screen reader, you can pull up all the links on a page. And partially for this reason, link text should generally identify the link destination. So for instance, click here is not a really good link text because no one has any idea where that's going if they just see that. So you would want to replace it with something that actually explains that. And similarly, you want to avoid having multiple links on the same page that go to different places but have the same text, because then people can't distinguish between them. So for instance, if you had slides for 2 different lectures, you don't want both of those links to just say slides, because then someone who pulls up the list can't tell what slides are going where. Titles and section headings. So these are important. Screen readers can navigate pages by headings. Again, they can just pull all of them up. Students in general, as Erin mentioned earlier, can orient and navigate by headings or review by them. In general, titles and headings should be concise and descriptive of their content. So you don't want to just call your first lecture, lecture 1, because that doesn't help anyone figure out what it's about. So for instance, lecture 1, igneous rocks, is much more helpful. You also don't want to leave out content. I have an example here where there's this is for a language course. And so this page is talking about travel. There's a part that's telling a story about some characters visiting the city. But then they also have a grammar section on the present progressive, which is common for language courses to intersperse things that way. But in the first example, the page title is just talking about travel. And that means that someone is going to have a really hard time finding the present progressive grammar section if they want to find it again or remember that it's there. And so it's better to put that in the title at that point and say something like talking about travel, the present progressive. All right. So extraneous load and similar things. So this is another one of those things that where we see that accessibility really helps everybody. So in general, cognitive load is basically the burden on working memory that's coming from information that you have to hold in your memory and information that you have to process in memory. And basically your working memory is limited. So the more that it's being taken up by something that's not very important, the less you have to learn material. And so this gets called extraneous processing. So extraneous processing doesn't support the instructional objective, and it's created by poor instructional layout. And basically, we want to minimize that because that makes it harder for students to learn. And this also helps us with cognitive accessibility, right? Students with maybe learning disabilities and things like that. It's, again, helpful to make things more cognitively accessible. So, slide. So a sort of intentionally ridiculous example is, let's say that I have a lesson on the battles of the Civil War, and I just put the battles in a completely random order. I didn't put them in a timeline order or a thematic order. I just randomized them. That would be a pretty bad idea. And that's not good for cognitive load, because if a student then wants to understand the overall flow of the war, they basically have to construct it themselves. They can't look at the page and have that help them. And of course, people are probably not going to do that. But a thing that people do sometimes do is, let's say, again, I have the battles of the Civil War, and I have each battle on its own page, and I don't have an outline or anything. The only way to get from page to page is to click previous and next. That basically does the same thing, right? If a student is trying to understand the overall flow of the war, they just have to hold it in their head, and that's hard on them. And slide. So this is generally talked about for when learning material, but there's basically similar principles when students are doing other things. So here I have two images that I just picked out. So one of them is a bus ramp and one of them is a curb cut. And let's say I was trying to add alt text to these images, but the way that my program did alt text is I had to click on each image and bring up adding alt text in the menu. And it would give me a little pop-up window, and then I would type in the alt text, and then that would go away. So as you can notice, this creates some problems. I can't tell which images I've added alt text to and which I haven't. I can't see the different alt texts at the same time. So if I want to synchronize them, that's not very helpful. I would have to keep opening it. And again, either hold it in my head or put it somewhere else, and then try to hold it in my head if I got them desynchronized. And again, this is extraneous load. It's making it harder to do the work and to do the learning because part of your brain is taken up with something that isn't really important. And conversely, right, we can help students with cognitive load with things like good outlines and graphical and big picture organizers and things like that that show them the outline of material or the relations of material. And again, do some of that work for them so that they can focus on understanding and learning things. Slide. Again, we've gone over some accessibility highlights and some remaining ones. As Erin also mentioned, in general, summaries, overviews of main points are very helpful. And again, that also connects back to cognitive load with doing some helping students with some of the work. And in general, avoiding walls of text, you want to use white space well so that it's easier for people to read. Slide. As we're going to do this week, you're going to be putting your material into Taurus. So some notes about using Taurus versus not using Taurus. So Taurus actually is going to handle some accessibility areas for you. I didn't go over color at all, which is a common accessibility note because color is handled by Taurus. Header levels, the page title will be the correct header level. Tab order, which is how to go through a page if you don't have a mouse, again, should be handled by Taurus. But remember that if you're linking students to external materials, then you do have to think about those things also. And in general, please help us continue to improve. When you give us feedback on accessibility, we can improve Taurus and make things more accessible to everyone, which is what we want to do. Slide, sorry.
Oh, okay.
All right, so that was just a very quick overview of accessibility. Again, obviously there's so much more there to talk about, but that's what we're doing today. I saw there were some questions in the chat. I will get to those. And if anyone has more questions, we'd like to hear them. So let's see. Sign asked, oh, sorry.
I can read it for you if you want.
Yeah,
can you address specifically the use of screenshots, like a library database, like of library databases throughout a search example? So I imagine what Sign has to do is she has to put a lot of instructions together for using library resources. And so she probably has to do a lot of example or images of screenshots of databases and things like that. So it's kind of similar to our problem when we're putting together how to use Taurus data, or how to use Taurus guides, like putting screenshots in that are kind of complicated. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, thank you. So that's something we're still working on, and I'm trying to learn more about. My current understanding, and I would like to be corrected if I'm wrong, is so part of something you want to think about is what the image descriptions are for, right? So again, right, image descriptions should be conveying the information that somebody needs. So partially, right, again, you want to help people if your image isn't loading, right, in which case maybe they can see the website normally, but they just can't see your image because it's not loading. So in that case, you would probably want to do things like, again, describe the general layout, right? Say like, oh, the search bar is at the top and, here are some menus and things like that. But if someone is using the image descriptions through a screen reader, they're probably also using the website through a screen reader. And so to them, I think that just describing things by saying, it's on the right or things like that might not be helpful. And it might be more helpful to consider what they need to do to access the database. But again, this is something I really want to learn more about. Yeah, apologies for
And
necessarily.
yeah,
knowing.
sorry, Sasha. And complex images are very contextual, right? Like, I think that was your point as well. Like, depending on what information you need from the image, really helping direct learners to that information as easily as possible. So Allison says, in the same vein, I'd love any advice about alt text for very technical or math-based figures. I'm surprised we haven't had that question before. I haven't anyway.
All right, so I'm assuming you mean things like graphs maybe, and not things like equations? Or do you mean things like equations?
So, well, I'll give you an example. So like a figure that shows like a triangle that has like equations marking different parts. So it's not an embedded equation in the text that can be read by a screen reader. It's embedded in the image. So it needs to be described, I assume.
Yes.
If it's not described in the text.
Yes. Okay, got it. That makes sense. So that would be a complex image. And so you do not want to try to put all that in the alt text. Again, alt text is not very good for complex images because all it can be is straight text. So it's hard to navigate. So for the alt text, then you would kind of put an overview, just write, of whatever this is, and direct people to an alternate format, which you could do with like the full formatting. So that might be a page you direct people to, or a section of a page. It can be there for everyone, or you can just direct people to it if they need it. And then on that alternate content location, then you could use things like equation writing, and maybe, for instance, you could do a bulleted list about the 3 triangle points. Screen readers are helpful with bulleted lists because they'll actually tell people how many bullets there are and go through them. So that would be, again, a complex image type description. Did that make sense?
I think so. Do you have any examples of like a supplementary page like that might exist?
I have one.
I just want to see it in action.
Yeah, of course. I will I have some resources I can bring up, but I don't have them at hand.
Okay.
We will try to get those to you.
Sure. Do you want me to shoot you an email so it's the questions in your email?
I think probably, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, just to remind me. But I was going to say, I think everyone could benefit from that, so we'll probably share them generally.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much.
And
of course.
Allison says, when the information is written below in a text step-by-step basis, I mark the image decorative. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That was Angela, actually, by the way. But
yeah, Angela, did I say something?
Sorry. So again, right, image descriptions and things like that can be very contextual. Right, in general, you don't need to duplicate information. So if you have some information, you don't have to repeat that in the alt text. I would have to look this up. I believe I've seen that this is an acceptable thing to do, to mark an image as decorative if it's already described elsewhere. Things you might want to think about is basically, is there a reason for the student to know that the image is there? Because screen readers just skip decorative images. So for instance, if you're going to be talking about the image and like mentioning that there was an image, right, that might be confusing to people if they just read a bullet pointed list and won't realize that when you're talking about the image, this is actually about the list that you're talking about. Or for instance, if other students are going to be doing that. So again, right, you might want to consider what information the student needs. And if this seems like it would be helpful, maybe again, put just like a very short, like several word, summary of the image. Like, let's say like, I don't know, let's say that you have the image is like taking people through directions for, cooking something. I don't know. And so you might say just like that the image would just say like just like directions for cooking pancakes. And then the list is the thing that's actually giving the directions. Did that make sense?
Yeah, Angela wrote, it is the official way I was taught, but the accessibility tools will give you a bad score if you do not mark it decorative or with text. And then she wrote,
Yeah.
yes, and thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
you should
just-
definitely do one of those things, because if you don't, then to a screen reader, they know that the image is there and they know that they don't know what's in it, which is not great. So it's
Right.
definitely do one of those.
But if it, yeah, it gets tricky though, because I mean, I might have misunderstood what you just said, that you wouldn't need to put one there if it's already there, but you still would need to mark it as decorative, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
If your intention is that these screen readers skip the image, then yeah, decorative is what will cause it to do that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
And again, please correct me if I'm wrong about anything. I hope I'm getting this right, but again,
And
I think this
Sasha's
is a very
being modest.
enriching. Yeah, this is a very enriching experience with alt text. It is something I teach. It is something I'm obsessed with, but I think the way that you are helping us explore it was very useful, and thank you.
thank you so much. I'm really glad. All right, thank you.
Okay, folks, I think that this next piece is Caitlin's going to talk us through how to stage data in Taurus, and we might only need the first couple steps. I'll let her take over and explain. You want me to keep navigating or doing the slides?
No, I'll
Caitlin?
take it.
Okay.
So, like Erin said, we kind of only really need the first couple steps. And the reason we're doing this is to give you an overhead view of why you are actually looking at writing so many questions. And we're going to talk first about staging your data. The first step is designing assessments to collect learning data and use learning objectives. Each learning objective is assigned to assessment questions so that they'll collect data, and you've been doing this already. And we want like 3 to 8 questions. So far, that's all you've really done. But the next step, which you'll be moving into over the next week or two, is actually taking the course or having your classmates take the course rather. In real life, this would be actual students. And this step is a little bit different depending on the nature of your course. Sometimes this step is a couple weeks because it's a pilot. Sometimes it might take a semester, but sometimes it might actually take multiple years because you're running the course with 12 people and you don't have the data from 12 people. You want data from, like, say, 40 people. So depending on your experiment, collecting data from learners might take a long time. And then after you've actually collected your data, you'll get a chance to analyze your data. And we'll talk a lot more about this in the upcoming weeks. But basically, you're going to have to take the data out of the course. In OLI, we have a few different ways to do this. We have a download for DataShop, which is a tool part of the Simon initiative, which you can use to create learning curves. And we also have the raw data, which is actual interaction data from every single thing a student does. So every time they've clicked something or entered a word, we have that data available for you to download as an author. They can make learning curves, you can do item analysis, and you can do learner sourcing. And this will be different depending on what system you're using. So if you're using OLI, it'll look like this, but if you're using Brightspace, it'll look like something else. Once you've extracted this learning data, you're going to have to import this into data analysis tools. DataShop requires you to sign up for the tools. And if you're using OLI, we also have some Python scripts that you can run. This can get a little bit technical, or you might not be able to do this on your own. And past the fellowship, we encourage you to email us when you need help importing your data into analysis tools or analyzing your data. So when you're analyzing the learning data, you're going to be looking at learning curves. You're going to be testing your hypothesis. And you're going to try to identify places where the course experience might be improved. This might be at the level of learning objectives, how much practice you give students, authoring content, or distractors in the assessment questions. So it might be literally just changing one question. And then from that point, you formed a new hypothesis. You think that student learning will be better. So you're going to actually redesign your course and collect data again. So that's moving all the way back to the first step. And this is an iterative process. I'm not sure we've talked about it a lot, but you want to do this over and over again between semesters. And it is honestly pretty hard to find the time to do that. But if you make it a part of your practice, it will help improve the learning over time. So I know I went through that super quick. The main idea, what I wanted you to get from this is that if you design your course for learning, it can be used to analyze the learning of students.
Thanks, Kate.
And oh,
So
and
yeah, let me walk you through this more. As you, right now, the next step that you need to focus on is getting your material into Taurus so that we can deliver it to each other and collect data for you. You know, I mentioned Learn Them Summer School, we do this in a week. You know, people have a day to get their content in and quickly out to everyone to take their course so they can collect data. Hopefully, we can do this, you know, we can do this over more than one day. And so now we want to have some working time. I don't know if we need breakout rooms or if we just want to just work quietly in this room until someone needs some help, and then we can do breakout rooms for individual conversations. We really only have like about 10 minutes left, but I'm willing to stay on as long as anybody needs me to, actually. So, and I'm sure others on the team can do that as well. So if you guys want to just work quietly and get started, or even if you guys want me to show you anything to help you get started, please just let me know. Just speak up.
I'll just say thank you for all the information today. I'm gonna have to go because the files I need to upload into Taurus, I don't have on this computer. And it'll make it a lot easier if I can access those other files, so.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you guys don't have to stay. We just want to make sure that you are supported in case any of you haven't tried yet to do Taurus work, that you know you don't stumble right off the bat, that we're here for you. So
Yeah,
but
I did look in and I think I'll be okay. Like I say, I know I have it in a better format elsewhere.
Perfect.
So
that's fine.
I'm gonna go
Great.
off. Have a nice
Thanks.
afternoon. Enjoy your Halloween.
Yeah, you too.
I have a question. So we go to create and then curriculum to start a page?
Yes, curriculum.
Okay. I'm at the very beginning, but.
No, it's okay. And know that we are bringing on board a UX designer very soon that will help us make that more intuitive.
Okay.
If the learning engineers were in charge of what things were called, they would be,
Did you put in your learning objectives already?
oh yeah,
not all
good
of
point,
them.
Sasha.
So I need,
Okay.
okay,
Clean.
Thank
Yeah, so as a general rule, we suggest putting in your learning objectives first, because then when you get to the pages, you can link right to those learning objectives. Because there'll be like a little drop down list of them, and so it'll be easier to remember what goes where and to do that.
Yeah.
so I'll go to objectives first and add those and then go to the pages. Thank you.
Yeah, and then that's actually why that's first in the list. We're trying to sort of nudge people to do that.
And thanks, Sasha, for that. And also know that, you know, there is office hours, and if you can't attend office hours, I think I've offered this to Colleen or some others, just reach out and we can schedule one-on-one meetings as well. And we're happy to do that. we know we've given you a fire hose of information and tasks to do, so we want to just make sure you're supported.
So can I just ask, as far as when we're actually structuring this, okay, we want to do like, we want to create a module page first.
So yeah, in Taurus, depending on how big or large your content is, I mean, in this case, you could just do pages. You don't have to do a container. If you want to keep it contained because you're going to be adding to it, or you know, you want to you know, for any other reason, you could do either pages, or you could arrange those pages in a container, which would be either a unit or a module. The way Taurus works is the first container is a unit, and then a container within that is a module.
Okay.
It's just, it doesn't matter really how you want to organize it. And given that this is a, you know, again, depending on what you're planning to do with this after the fellowship, if it's just for the fellowship, you could probably just do pages. You don't have to do any containers.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And if you need me to show you how to do any of this, I'm happy to.
In chat, Sign is asking, is there a specific list of what is needed in the course shell to be considered to have completed this fellowship? We are looking to actually use these assessment questions in another location, so I only want to put in as much as I need to in this course.
Well, so for this course, it's really to take you through the process of creating those questions, making sure they're measurable, and then collecting data on them so that we can show you how they can be used. The data on those can be used to do improvements. So the final thing that you'll need to do is create an improvement plan from the data that you collect. So as many, I would say put in as many questions as you have the time to, and that you think will give you enough information about how well the learners can attain the information, master the information. I know it's kind of like a, okay, I'm glad that helps. I was like, I kind of gave a non-answer, I think, but you know, and it depends. But the real just collect some data and be able to do an improvement plan, and that's the completion of the fellowship.
I apologize. I realized I forgot to read the instructions. The rest of our time in this session is a working session. We'll be in the main room answering questions, but if you would like to work in a quiet room or talk to an online mentor, breakout rooms are available for you to join. The goal for this session is to add at least one page to your project on Taurus. Log into Taurus authoring at this link we have, start a new project if you haven't already, enter your learning objectives, enter your learning content and assessments.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha and Tanvi. I did make an assumption that folks had already been in there, but I shouldn't have. So thank you for keeping that, for stating that.
And Sign says, sorry, I'm confused. Do we also have to add learning content? That is, so this week's project work is about creating your learning content and also about putting all your content together into Taurus. So if you haven't created learning content yet, that makes sense because that's this week's assignment.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're trying to create a self-contained lesson, and you can define that however you want, whether it's a module or a unit or just a set of pages, but you know, a self-contained lesson that has content and questions, practice questions against the learning objectives, so that you can test out how well the assessments help measure the learning and to generate data on that learning.
Sign says, okay, now I'm confused again. Previously, you said only the assessment questions and learning objectives were required. Please, can you clarify?
Well, they're required because that's what's going to generate the data. but you're going to get really bad data if there isn't content associated with those questions. So apologies for not being clearer about that. You want it to be a self-contained lesson that someone like me could go through and learn and answer the questions, and that will tell you how good everything is aligned and what kind of quality module you have or quality content.
Sign says, so we are required to create the full content of the 2-hour course as well.
That was the intent, yes.
And also some people are thanking us and also heading off. So bye guys, have a great week.
Yeah. So the needed parts for this course are a self-contained module that learners can go through and practice with the content to generate data that you will use then to create an improvement plan for the course. So you build a 2-hour course, or some amount of content for a learner to go through, and it will generate data. And then the improvement plan will be the final thing that you need to do.
And the question Erin was just answering is that Sign asked, so the needed parts for completion of this course are learning objectives, content, and assessments. And Allison asked, would the basic page for creating content be practice page? And Tanvi said, yes, if it is quizzes or summative assessments, we use summative assessments. So yeah, basically practice page is intended to be content and formative assessments. And then graded pages are graded things.
So Sign, to your question that you already have content on another platform, do you need to copy it over? Good question. I mean, ideally you want this to be a self-contained lesson, but we do have the ability within Taurus that you could link out possibly. So depending on what other platform that content lives, as long as it's accessible by like me just randomly going through your course, then you can be creative about how you point me to the content to learn.
And the question Erin was just answering is that Sign asked, I already have the content on another platform. Do I need to copy it over?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't repeat the question either time. Thanks, Sasha. And if you need help, Sign with how to do that, or even some creative brainstorming about how to do something so that you don't have to recreate everything, we could go into a breakout room.
Yeah, are there any import tools?
We do have import tools. They are something like we can import Pressbooks, we can import other OLI content from our old system. Yeah,
for Pressbooks, is it the XML Pressbooks backup or another format?
I would have to ask, and we would have to do that for you, but I can certainly try.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done that myself yet. I just know it can be done.
Well, that's very cool. Okay, well, I've got to head out, but this was very helpful. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Sign said, thanks, I'll figure it out. It's on a LibGuide, so I'll figure this out.
Okay, hopefully let us know if you need help.
Hey, I'm gonna pop into office hours on Friday.
Okay.
So that way I can get some stuff into the system and then hopefully have something for you all to take a look at and give me some feedback on. So I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you all have done. This has just been an absolutely amazing experience. So
glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Have a great Halloween.
You too. Okay, so Caitlin was keeping me honest in timing. Sorry if I went over a little bit. It was hard to not cut that first discussion